November 2, 1944. Low gray clouds over western Czechoslovakia. 23,000 feet above a quilt of forests and frozen farmland. First Lieutenant Bruce W. Carr of the U.S. Army Air Forces tightens, his gloved hand around the stick of his North American P-51 Mustang. The Merlin engine in front of him howls at full war power, the aircraft shuddering as it claws for altitude. The canopy vibrates with the pulse of .50 caliber machine guns firing somewhere behind him. He doesn't need to look back to know they're there. Bandits! 3 o'clock high! Someone had called over the radio minutes earlier. The sky had exploded into chaos. Silver Mustangs scattering, dark shapes diving through cloud breaks like hunting hawks. Now one of those shapes is glued to Carr's tail. A Focke-Wulf Fw 190. The German fighter flashes into view in his rearview mirror. Short nose, radial engine, thick wings. It's close. Too close. Cannon flashes spark from its wings, and the Mustang jolts violently. A metallic hammering rips through the fuselage. The cockpit fills with the sharp stench of burning glycol and cordite. Warning lights blink red across the panel. Oil pressure dropping. Coolant temperature spiking. The Merlin's steady roar breaks into a ragged cough. Carr shoves the throttle forward anyway. The Mustang surges, then stutters again as another burst slams into the left wing. The aircraft rolls unexpectedly. Flight controls going mushy in his hands. He's alone now. The formation has dissolved. The radio crackles with half-heard calls. Someone yelling about flak, another screaming for help. Then static. Altitude unwinds. 18,000 feet. The Fw-190 pulls up for another firing pass. Carr banks hard left, trying to throw off the German's aim, but the engine gives up first. A deafening bang shakes the airframe. The propeller blades freeze mid-spin, windmilling uselessly as smoke floods past the canopy. Dead stick. The Mustang becomes a glider over enemy territory. Below him stretch miles of dark pine forest and scattered villages. Roads crawling with Wehrmacht trucks like ants. The front line lies somewhere to the west, but not close enough. He tries the radio again. Nothing. At 10,000 feet, the cockpit grows eerily quiet except for the wind screaming around the canopy. Without engine vibration, every small sound feels amplified. The creak of metal, the whistle of air through bullet holes. Carr runs through the checklist from memory. Fuel off. Mixture idle cut off. Canopy unlocked. He scans the ground for a clearing. There, an open patch between tree lines, maybe a pasture. The Mustang descends fast. He lowers flaps manually, the aircraft resisting like a wounded animal. The ground rushes up, brown and white and unforgiving. At the last second, the left wing dips. Damage from the cannon hits. The wingtip clips a tree. Wood explodes. The Mustang cartwheels once, twice, metal shrieking as it tears itself apart. Then silence. Snow drifts lazily through the broken canopy. Carr hangs upside down in his harness, stunned but conscious. His helmet is gone. Blood trickles from a cut above his eye. The cockpit smells of spilled fuel and hot metal. He fumbles for the buckle and drops hard into the crushed canopy glass. Pain shoots up his leg, but nothing feels broken. Move. He kicks free of the wreckage, crawling out into the cold forest air. The Mustang, his Mustang, lies in splintered ruin, wings twisted, olive drab paint torn open to bare aluminum. Smoke rises in a thin column that can be seen for miles. Too visible. He pulls his parachute free from the cockpit and drags it into the trees, covering it with branches. From inside his flight jacket he checks what he has. A .45 caliber M1911 pistol, a few magazines, a small escape map printed on silk, some emergency rations. No radio. No winter gear beyond what he's wearing. And he's at least 60 miles behind German lines. The smart move would be to surrender. Wehrmacht troops are everywhere in this region. Patrols will be combing the forest within hours. Carr looks west, toward where he knows Allied lines must be. Then he looks back at the wreck. No, he mutters to himself. He won't be a prisoner. By late afternoon, German voices echo faintly through the trees. Dogs bark in the distance. Search parties. Carr moves carefully, stepping where the ground is hard, avoiding snow patches that might preserve footprints. The forest is thick, dark, and already freezing as the November sun sinks early behind clouds. Each breath fogs the air. He walks until nightfall, boots soaking through, fingers numb inside his gloves. Twice he drops flat as trucks rumble along nearby roads. Once he hears the distinct mechanical clatter of an SD, KFZ, half-track somewhere beyond the tree line. He studies his silk map under moonlight. Czechoslovakia, German-occupied territory. Luftwaffe airfields scattered across the region to defend vital industrial targets. He'd seen them from the air dozens of times. Long concrete runways, dispersal areas hidden under camouflage netting. Airfields. The thought lingers. Airfields have fuel. Airfields have aircraft. He dismisses it immediately. The idea is insane. Even if he found one, what would he do? Ask politely for directions? But the thought doesn't leave. Instead of heading blindly west, Carr adjusts course slightly south. He knows German fighters in this sector operate heavily, meaning bases must be nearby. If he can reach one, he doesn't finish the thought. On the second day, hunger sets in. He eats sparingly from his rations, snow melting on his tongue for water. The cold seeps into his bones. Twice he hides from passing patrols. Once he lies submerged in an icy ditch as a column of Wehrmacht infantry marches by, boots crunching rhythmically on frozen earth. His mind keeps returning to the sky. He knows German aircraft. Intelligence briefings had drilled silhouettes into his memory. Messerschmitt Bf 109, Focke-Wulf Fw 190. He's fought them, studied their strengths and weaknesses. He knows how they maneuver. He just doesn't know how they feel from the cockpit. On the evening of November 4th, through a break in the trees, he sees it. A control tower rising above a dark field. Camouflage netting stretched over revetments. The unmistakable outline of fighters parked wingtip to wingtip. A Luftwaffe airfield. Engines cough somewhere in the distance. A truck drives along the perimeter road, headlights dimmed. Carr crouches in the treeline, heart pounding harder than it did at 23,000 feet. He should turn away. Instead, he studies the layout like he's planning an attack run. Guards at the main gate. Patrol moving along the southern fence line. A dispersal area on the far edge that looks less active. And there, parked slightly apart from the others, a Focke-Wulf Fw 190. Dark. Unattended. The wind shifts, carrying the smell of aviation fuel across the field. Carr feels something shift inside him. If he can get to that aircraft, if he can figure out the controls, if he can get it airborne before anyone reacts, it's madness. But surrender is certain captivity. He waits for full darkness, eyes locked on the silent German fighter across the frozen field. Night settles hard over the Luftwaffe field. The last smear of twilight disappears behind low clouds, and the airfield transforms into a world of silhouettes and muted sounds. Boots crunching on gravel, distant laughter from a barracks hut, the metallic clank of tools somewhere near the hangars. A generator hums steadily near the control tower, its rhythm almost comforting in the darkness. Bruce Carr lies flat in the treeline, watching. The Focke-Wulf Fw 190 sits about 200 yards from his position, angled slightly into the wind. Its broad wings cast thick shadows across the frost-covered grass. The aircraft looks squat and predatory compared to the sleek lines of his lost P-51. The radial engine cowling gives it a blunt, muscular nose. He studies the patrol patterns. 2 guards pass along the perimeter road every 15 minutes. A mechanic smokes beside a truck near the main dispersal area, but the outer revetments appear quiet. No floodlights, no heavy activity. Carr exhales slowly. This isn't a raid. There's no squadron overhead to distract the Germans. No artillery barrage. No chaos. Just him. He waits until the patrol disappears around the far end of the field. Then he moves. Low, fast, silent. He slips from tree to shadow, crossing the frozen ground in short bursts. Each step feels deafening in his ears, though the wind covers much of the sound. Twice he drops flat as voices drift closer, heart hammering so violently he's sure it must be audible. 50 yards. 30. He can see the black crosses on the fuselage now. The Balkenkreuz stark against the dull camouflage paint. 10 yards. He presses himself against the aircraft's wing, cold metal seeping through his gloves. The smell of oil and fuel is strong here. Close up, the FW-190 looks even more compact than it did in the air. Thick landing gear struts, heavy armor plating around the cockpit. He circles to the port side and grips the canopy rail. Locked. He tries the handle. It shifts. Unlocked. Carr freezes for a full 3 seconds, listening. No shout. No alarm. He slides the canopy back slowly, wincing at the faint scrape of metal. The cockpit is dark, unfamiliar. The instrument panel is a wall of German-labeled gauges, airspeed in kilometers per hour, altitude in meters, placards he can't read at a glance. He climbs in. The seat feels different, higher-backed, tighter. The control stick shorter and thicker than the Mustang's. Rudder pedals set at a slightly different angle. He pulls the canopy halfway closed, leaving just enough gap to slip out if needed. Now comes the impossible part. He has never flown a Focke-Wulf, but he's studied enough enemy wreckage and intelligence photos to know the basics. Throttle should be on the left. Magnetos, fuel selector, primer. He runs his gloved fingers across switches, reading what little German he can piece together. Kraftstoff, fuel, good. He scans for the ignition sequence. Radial engine BMW 801. Complex, temperamental. He whispers the process to himself like a prayer. Fuel on. Battery. Magnetos. He hesitates before pressing the starter. If the engine doesn't catch, the noise alone will bring every guard running. If it does catch, they'll still hear it. There's no quiet way out. Carr pushes the starter. For a split second, nothing happens. Then the radial engine coughs, once, twice, belching a burst of smoke from the exhaust stacks. The propeller jerks, then begins to spin. The engine roars to life with a deep, throaty thunder far louder than the Merlin he's used to. The entire airframe vibrates violently, shaking frost from the wings. Across the field, a shout. Another voice answers. Carr slams the canopy shut and fumbles for the throttle, easing it forward. The aircraft lurches ahead unevenly, tailwheel bumping across frozen grass. A spotlight snaps on near the tower, sweeping across the dispersal area. He doesn't know the taxi procedures. Doesn't care. He points the nose toward the darkest stretch of runway he can see and pushes power. The FW-190 surges forward, engine howling at full throttle. The tail comes up faster than he expects, the nose dipping aggressively. He corrects instinctively, fighting the torque pulling him left. Tracer rounds streak past the canopy from somewhere behind him. They're firing. The runway blurs beneath him. The airspeed needle climbs, 80, 120, 160 kilometers per hour. Is that enough? He doesn't know the rotation speed. He pulls back gently. The wheels leave the ground. For a heartbeat, the aircraft wallows, heavy and unstable. Carr keeps the nose level, resisting the urge to yank it higher. The landing gear lever, where? He spots it and retracts the gear. The clunk is audible even over the engine. More tracers arc up from the edge of the field. He banks sharply into the darkness, skimming barely 50 feet above the treetops. The altimeter reads in meters. He forces himself to think differently. 100 meters. Too high. He descends lower, almost brushing the trees. Behind him, the airfield shrinks into a scatter of lights and confusion. In front of him lies blackness, and somewhere beyond it, Allied lines. But he's flying a German fighter. To both sides, and neither side knows it's him. The forest rushes beneath him in a dark blur. Bruce Carr keeps the Focke-Wulf Fw-190 low, dangerously low, no more than 30 or 40 feet above the treetops. The radial engine's roar feels impossibly loud in the night, echoing across valleys and frozen fields. Every instinct screams at him to climb, to gain altitude and safety. But altitude means visibility, and visibility means recognition. Right now, in the blackness, he is just another shadow moving through German airspace. The instrument panel glows faintly green. The airspeed indicator, kilometers per hour, hovers around 350. Faster than he realizes. The aircraft feels heavier than the Mustang, more muscular in its control response. The roll rate is sharp, almost violent. A slight touch on the stick sends the horizon tilting abruptly. He forces himself to breathe. He has flown hundreds of combat hours in the P-51. He knows how to feel an airplane through the controls. The Fw-190 is different, but not alien. Air is still air. Lift is still lift. Ahead, the darkness thins. A faint orange glow flickers along the western horizon. The front line. Artillery flashes intermittently, silent at this distance. The war's dividing seam. He checks his heading again by memory and terrain features. Rivers snake like black ribbons below him. A railway line glints faintly in moonlight. Then the first searchlight snaps on. A white beam slices into the sky from somewhere ahead, sweeping left to right. Another ignites beside it. Then a third. German flak batteries guarding the approaches. Carr swears under his breath. He can't turn back. Fuel is a question mark. He has no idea how much is in the tanks. He didn't dare check before starting the engine. The gauges are in German, and he hasn't had time to decipher every marking. The searchlight beam passes just behind him. Then it finds him. The white cone locks onto the Fw-190's fuselage, illuminating the black crosses in brilliant clarity. For a split second, he considers rocking wings, some signal to show he belongs. But he doesn't know their recognition procedures. The first flak burst detonates off his right wingtip. A black puff blossoms in the night sky, shockwave rocking the aircraft. Then another, and another. They're firing at him. Of course they are. He took off without clearance from a base now in chaos. To them, he could be a deserter, a captured aircraft, an intruder. Carr shoves the throttle forward to maximum power. The BMW 801 howls in protest, but responds. He banks violently left, diving lower, almost scraping treetops again. Flak bursts chase him, but at this altitude the gunners struggle to depress their barrels. He bursts through the searchlight cone and vanishes into darkness again. The front line is close now, he can feel it. The ground below shows scars. Cratered fields, burned out vehicles, trenches carved like wounds across farmland. Then the sky changes. The searchlights behind him fade. New ones ignite ahead. Whiter, sharper, allied. Carr's stomach tightens. From the ground, what they see is unmistakable. A Focke-Wulf Fw-190 approaching from German territory. An enemy fighter. A British anti-aircraft battery opens up first. Tracer rounds, bright red arcs, stitch upward toward him. One passes so close he feels the heat through the canopy. "Don't shoot," he mutters helplessly, as if they can hear him. He rocks his wings violently, dips the nose, raises it again. Anything to signal distress. Another battery joins in. The sky becomes a web of tracers. He cannot climb, cannot slow down. The only option is speed. He pushes the nose slightly down and accelerates, skimming over the front lines at barely 50 feet. He sees flashes of muzzle fire from foxholes as infantry take shots at the low-flying silhouette. The Fw-190 bucks in turbulence from exploding shells. One round punches through the right wing with a metallic crack. The aircraft shudders but holds. Carr clenches his jaw. He has survived German cannon fire. He will not die from friendly fire. Ahead, beyond the lines, he spots something familiar in the dark. An Allied airstrip. A perimeter of dim lights, barely visible. He recognizes the runway layout from briefing maps. It must be one of the forward fields used by the 354th Fighter Group. Home. He throttles back slightly and raises the nose, climbing just enough to line up for approach. Immediately, flares launch from the ground. Red and white bursts illuminating the sky. Recognition signals. He doesn't know them. He lowers his landing gear anyway. The clunk echoes through the fuselage. Ground fire resumes, hesitant but still lethal. Tracers zip past the cockpit. One smashes through the canopy's rear section, showering him with fragments. He refuses to break off. He lines up with the runway, fighting the urge to sideslip wildly under fire. The Fw-190 feels stable in landing configuration. Solid, predictable. "Easy, easy," he whispers. He crosses the threshold slightly fast. Cuts throttle. The radial engine drops to a deep growl. He flares, judging by instinct rather than known stall speeds. The wheels slam onto the runway hard enough to rattle his teeth. The aircraft bounces once, twice, then settles. He rides it out, braking carefully, terrified the unfamiliar system might lock up. The FW-190 slows, rolling crookedly down the strip before finally grinding to a stop. Silence descends except for the ticking of cooling metal. For 3 long seconds, nothing happens. Then jeeps race toward him from both ends of the runway. Armed men spill out, rifles trained on the cockpit. Carr raises both hands slowly and slides the canopy open. Cold night air rushes in. He pulls off his helmet liner and shouts in English, voice hoarse, "Don't shoot! I'm American!" There's stunned silence. One soldier steps closer, squinting up at the face inside the German fighter. "Who the hell are you?" he demands. Carr manages a grin despite the blood drying on his cheek. "Lieutenant Bruce Carr," he says, "and I'd like to report I borrowed this one." For a moment, no one moves. The rifles remain trained on the cockpit of the Focke-Wulf Fw-190. The black crosses on the wings gleam under the runway lamps. The engine ticks and pops as it cools, metal contracting in the freezing night air. Lieutenant Bruce Carr keeps both hands raised. A sergeant steps closer, squinting up at him. "Say that again." "First Lieutenant Bruce W. Carr," he repeats, voice steadier now. 354th Fighter Group. "My P-51 was shot down 2 days ago." Pause. "Prove it." Carr slowly lowers one hand and reaches inside his flight jacket. Instantly, 6 bolts click back on rifles. "Easy," he says. "Dog tags." He pulls them free and lets them dangle in the floodlight glare. The sergeant steps in close enough to read them, lips moving silently. The tension breaks like a snapped cable. "Jesus Christ," someone mutters. Within minutes he's pulled from the cockpit and surrounded. Mechanics, MPs, intelligence officers roused from their bunks. They circle the captured German fighter in awe, running hands along its fuselage, peering into Will Wells. "You flew this thing in?" a crew chief asks, incredulous. Carr nods. "Took off from a Luftwaffe field east of the lines." Another pilot pushes through the crowd, still in flight jacket, hair mussed from sleep. He stops dead at the sight. "That's a 190, he breathes. "You're telling me you just stole it?" Carr shrugs, suddenly exhausted. Seemed easier than walking. Inside a dim operations shack, he sits wrapped in a wool blanket, hands finally starting to shake now that the adrenaline has drained away. A mug of coffee steams between his palms. Across the table, an intelligence captain flips open a notebook. "Start from the beginning," the captain says. "Date, location, aircraft type." Carr takes a long breath. November 2nd. Escort mission over western Czechoslovakia. Flying P-51 Mustang. Took cannon fire from a Focke-Wulf. Engine failed. Forced landing in forest. He recounts the crash, the smoke, the cartwheeling impact, hiding from patrols. The march through freezing woods. The moment he spotted the airfield. When he describes climbing into the German fighter, the room goes completely silent. "You had prior training on the FW-190? The captain asks carefully. "No, sir." "You speak German?" "Not enough to order dinner." A few nervous chuckles ripple through the room. "And you started it how?" Carr leans back slightly, replaying it in his mind. "Guessed." The captain stops writing. "You guessed. I've seen enough engines torn down," Carr says. "Fuel, magnetos, starter. Same principles, just different labels." There's a long pause. "And you flew it? Across the front?" "Yes, sir." "Under fire from both sides?" "Yes, sir." Another officer, older, with colonel's eagles on his collar, studies him intently. "You realize," the colonel says slowly, "that both German and Allied gunners tried to shoot you down?" Carr manages a tired smile. "Yes, sir. I noticed." Before dawn, mechanics swarm the Focke-Wulf under heavy guard. Intelligence photographers document every inch: armament, armor plating, engine cowling, cockpit instrumentation. The aircraft is a prize beyond measure. Intact, flyable, delivered straight into Allied hands. Pilots from the 354th Fighter Group gather around it like schoolboys around a forbidden machine. "That's the one that's been giving us hell," one mutters, staring at the broad wings and radial engine. "And you just flew it in." Carr steps outside briefly despite orders to rest. He runs a hand along the FW-190's fuselage, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. 2 days ago, one just like it had shot him out of the sky. Now one sits parked on an American runway because he refused to surrender. Word spreads fast. By afternoon, higher command is already sending inquiries. How did it happen? Was the airfield lightly defended? What model variant? Was it operationally valuable? Carr answers what he can. Many details blur together now in retrospect. The exact patrol timing, the runway angle, the sequence of switches he flipped in the dark. But one thing remains clear. He never seriously considered surrender. In the days that follow, he's sent briefly to a rear area for medical evaluation and formal debriefing. Aside from bruises and mild frostbite, he's intact. When asked why he took such a risk, he gives a simple answer. I wanted to get back to my squadron. No speeches. No dramatics. Just that. Weeks later, he's back in the cockpit of a P-51 Mustang. Merlin engine roaring once again beneath him. The familiar hum feels almost comforting after the guttural growl of the BMW radial. As he climbs into formation, he glances down at the patchwork of Europe below. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies the forest where his Mustang burned. And somewhere in Allied custody sits the German fighter he stole from under the Luftwaffe's nose. The war continues. Missions stack up. The sky remains as deadly as ever. But among fighter pilots, American, British, even German, the story spreads. A downed Mustang pilot who walked into an enemy airfield, started a Focke-Wulf by guesswork, took off under gunfire, and flew it home through a gauntlet of flak from both sides. Not rumor, not legend, just nerve, just skill, just refusal to quit.